What would you do if your own family seated you in the VIP section at your brother's wedding, only to discover it was actually exile disguised as honor? And what if the moment you uncovered the truth, it destroyed the perfect bride's carefully constructed lies in front of 200 guests? This is my story. Hi, I'm Jessica. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 weeks ago at my brother's wedding reception. It's the moment I realized I never truly had a place in my own family. Picture this, a $500 a plate dinner, crystal chandeliers, and 200 of Chicago's elites celebrating the perfect couple. I walked into that ballroom wearing my navy dress clutch in hand, ready to smile for photos and toast my brother's happiness. But then, I saw the seating chart. VIP mezzanine, table 12, that's where they put me. Not with the family, not even close to the family. While my mother sat front and center with the bride's parents, while my brother's college friends got prime real estate near the dance floor, I was banished to a balcony overlooking the celebration, like some distant relative nobody really knew. That's when it hit me. After 28 years of trying to earn my place at this table, I was still just watching from the sidelines. But here's the thing about being invisible for so long. You start seeing things other people miss. You start hearing conversations other people ignore, and sometimes you discover secrets that change everything. This is the story of how I went from family outcast to the one person who saved my brother from the biggest mistake of his life. And how I finally learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Let me paint you the picture of where this all went down. The Lakefront Manor in Lake Forest, Illinois. You know, the kind of venue where old money goes to show off new money. Think marble floors that echo your footsteps, towering windows overlooking Lake Michigan, and enough fresh flowers to stock a small florist shop. David and Zelda had rented out the entire estate for 3 days. 3 days. As I pulled into the circular driveway that Saturday evening, valets in white gloves were whisking away BMWs and Teslas like they were playing some expensive game of musical cars. I handed over my keys to my modest Honda Civic and watched the young man try not to smirk. Welcome to my family's world, where appearances matter more than people. Walking through those grand double doors, I was hit by the sound of champagne glasses clinking, and that particular brand of laughter rich people make when they're trying to impress each other. The ballroom was draped in ivory silk and gold accents with centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's rent. I spotted my mother immediately. Linda Martinez standing near the head table in her emerald green gown, the one she'd been talking about for 6 months. She was gesturing dramatically to the wedding planner, probably micromanaging some detail that no one else would notice. Classic mom. David was across the room looking sharp in his custom tuxedo, shaking hands with his new in-laws. My little brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Even from a distance, I could see that practiced smile he'd perfected over the years. The one that said, "I'm successful and happy, and everything is exactly as it should be." And then there was Zelda. God, she looked stunning. I'll give her that. Her dress was this flowing masterpiece of Italian lace that moved like water when she walked. Her hair was swept into this perfect chignon that probably took 3 hours to achieve. She was holding court near the champagne fountain, surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them laughing at whatever witty observation she'd just made. From the outside, it was picture perfect. The kind of wedding that would look amazing on Instagram, the kind of celebration that screams, "We made it." But I'd learned a long time ago that in my family, the prettier the picture, the uglier the reality underneath. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked toward the guest registration table. The coordinator, a woman in her 50s, with the kind of permanent smile that comes from years of dealing with difficult clients, looked up at me expectantly. "Jessica Martinez," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She ran her perfectly manicured finger down the guest list, paused, and then looked up at me with what I swear was a hint of confusion. Yes, here you are. You're seated at the VIP mezzanine table, 12. VIP mezzanine, that sounded fancy, right? That sounded like somewhere important people sit. But as she handed me the small card with directions, something in her tone made my stomach drop. The way she said it was the same way someone might tell you that your parking spot is technically still in the same zip code. I followed the arrows and the elegant signage up a curved staircase to the second floor. The mezzanine overlooked the main ballroom like a theater balcony. It was beautiful, sure, with its own bar and scattered cocktail tables, but it was also completely separate from the family tables below. From up here, I could see everything. The head table where Mom sat with David and Zelda. The prime tables filled with college friends and business associates. The dance floor where everyone would soon be celebrating, but they couldn't really see me. I was close enough to witness the celebration, but far enough away to not actually be part of it. It was like being invited to watch your own exclusion in high definition. Standing there alone on that mezzanine, champagne glass in hand, looking down at my own family's reception, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't an oversight. This was intentional. Standing on that mezzanine, I felt like I was watching my life through glass. Everything looked perfect from up here, but I couldn't touch it, couldn't be part of it. I needed answers. I made my way back downstairs, weaving through clusters of guests who were busy taking selfies and complimenting each other's outfits. The main floor buzzed with the kind of energy that comes when important people gather to celebrate other important people. I found Mom near the seating chart display, adjusting flowers that were already perfect. She was in her element, playing the role of mother of the groom, basking in the attention and compliments from guests. "Mom," I said, approaching her with what I hoped looked like casual curiosity, rather than the growing knot of hurt in my chest. She turned to me with that bright public smile she reserved for social events. "Jessica, sweetheart, don't you look lovely? How do you like the venue? Isn't it just spectacular?" "It's beautiful," I said, and it was. "But I wanted to ask you about the seating arrangement. I'm up on the mezzanine level." Her smile flickered for just a moment. Just a moment. But I caught it. "Oh yes, the VIP section. Isn't that nice? You get the best view of everything from up there." "But Mom," I said, keeping my voice low so the nearby guests wouldn't overhear, "I'm not sitting with the family. I'm not even on the same floor as the family." She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in public. "Jessica, honey, there are only so many seats at the head table. We had to prioritize immediate family and the wedding party." "I am immediate family," I said, and I could hear the edge creeping into my voice despite my best efforts. "I'm your daughter. I'm David's sister." "Of course you are, sweetheart." But Zelda's parents needed to be accommodated, and David's groomsmen and the maid of honor's family. "It's just logistics." Logistics? That's what my place in this family had been reduced to. A logistics problem. I looked past her to the head table she was talking about. There was Mom's seat right in the center. David and Zelda, of course. Zelda's parents. The best man and maid of honor. And yes, there were 2 empty chairs. 2 empty chairs that could have been for me. "Those empty seats," I said, pointing toward the head table. "Those are for late arrivals," she said quickly. "David's mentor from the firm and his wife. They're flying in from New York." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break exactly, just crack. Like the first hairline fracture in ice before it completely shatters. "Right?" I said softly. "Of course." Before I could say anything else that might cause a scene, I spotted David near the bar. My little brother, looking handsome and happy, chatting with a group of his fraternity brothers. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe this was all Mom's doing and David would be just as upset as I was. I walked over, waited for a break in the conversation, and tapped him on the shoulder. "Hey, big sister," he said, turning around with a genuine smile that made my heart lift for just a moment. "You look great. How are you enjoying the party?" "It's beautiful, David. Really, congratulations." I meant that. Whatever else was happening, I did want him to be happy. "Can I steal you for just a second?" We stepped away from his friends, finding a quieter corner near one of the massive floral arrangements. I wanted to ask you about the seating, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I'm up on the mezzanine level, which is lovely, but I was wondering if there might be a way to move closer to the family tables. His face shifted, and I saw something I didn't expect. Not surprise, not confusion, not guilt. Jess, he said, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. Look, I know it's not ideal, but we had to make some tough choices. There were a lot of people to accommodate. But I'm your sister, I said, the words coming out smaller than I intended. I know that. Of course I know that. But you have to understand, this wedding isn't just about family. It's about business connections, Zelda's family's expectations, the whole social aspect of it. You're independent, Jess. You always have been. You don't need to be right up front to enjoy the celebration. There it was. The word that had followed me my entire life. Independent. In my family, independent was code for doesn't need attention. It was the word they used to justify leaving me out, overlooking me making decisions, without considering how they might affect me. I was independent when they forgot to include me in family vacation planning. I was independent when they didn't invite me to David's engagement dinner because it was just a small thing. I was independent when Mom redecorated my childhood bedroom into a home office without asking because I had my own place now. It's just a seat, Jess, David continued, clearly wanting to end this conversation. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Standing there looking at my brother, the person I'd protected and supported and cheered for my entire life, I realized something that hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't poor planning or unfortunate logistics. This was a choice. A deliberate choice to place me exactly where they felt I belonged. At the margins, looking in from the outside, close enough to witness their happiness, but far enough away to not interfere with it. You're right, I said, finally forcing a smile. It's just a seat. But as I walked away from him back toward the stairs that would take me to my assigned place in the shadows, I knew something had fundamentally changed. I was done pretending this was normal. I was done making excuses for them. I was done being grateful for scraps. For the first time in my life, I was ready to stop being the understanding one, the independent one, the one who didn't need anything from anybody. I was ready to need something. I was ready to demand something. I was ready to matter. I climbed those stairs back to the mezzanine, feeling like I was walking underwater. Everything felt slow and muffled and wrong. Back at my assigned table, I sat down in the chair that faced the ballroom below. From this angle, I had a perfect view of my family celebrating without me. I could see Mom holding court at the head table, gesturing animatedly as she told some story that was making everyone laugh. I could see David and Zelda sharing a private moment, his hand on her lower back as she whispered something in his ear. It was like watching a movie about someone else's life. A life that looked suspiciously like the one I thought I belonged to. The rage started as a small hot coal in my chest. Not the explosive kind of anger that makes you scream or throw things. The quiet kind, the kind that burns slow and steady and changes you from the inside out. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I took a screenshot of the seating chart they'd posted online for guests. Then I took a photo of my view from the mezzanine. The evidence of my exile documented in high definition. That's when the memory hit me. Christmas. 2 years ago, we'd all gathered at Mom's house for our traditional Christmas Eve dinner. I'd spent weeks planning what to get everyone, carefully choosing gifts that showed how much I paid attention to their lives. For David, I'd found a first edition of his favorite novel from college. For Mom, a vintage scarf I'd tracked down on eBay that matched one she'd lost years ago and mourned ever since. But what I remember most about that Christmas wasn't the gifts. It was watching Zelda receive her first official family Christmas stocking. Mom had made it herself with Zelda's name embroidered in gold thread, hanging right next to David's on the mantelpiece. This was less than 6 months after they'd started dating. I wanted her to feel included, Mom had explained when she noticed me staring at it. She's going to be part of this family. I'd been part of this family for 26 years at that point. My stocking was still the same one from childhood with faded fabric and my name written in Mom's much younger handwriting. But it wasn't just the stocking. That whole evening, Zelda was at the center of every conversation. Mom asked her about her work, her family, her opinions on everything from the dinner menu to the living room decor. Zelda offered suggestions about holiday traditions we should adopt, ways we could improve our celebrations. And everyone listened. Everyone nodded. Everyone agreed. I sat in the same chair I'd occupied for every Christmas dinner since I was old enough to sit at the adult table, and I felt like a guest in my own family's home. But the moment that really stuck with me, the moment that I pushed down and tried to forget, but that came rushing back now as I sat alone on this mezzanine, was when Mom brought out the family photo albums. "Oh, Zelda has to see the baby pictures," Mom had said, settling onto the couch with 3 thick albums spanning David's childhood. Page after page of David's first steps, first day of school, little league games, science fair projects. Mom narrated each photo with the kind of detail that comes from having treasured these memories for decades. I waited for her to bring out my albums. I waited for my turn to be remembered, to be celebrated, to be presented as someone worth knowing. She never did. When Zelda asked, "What about Jessica's baby pictures?" Mom had waved a hand dismissively and said, "Oh, Jessica was always so independent. She never liked having her picture taken." That wasn't true. I loved having my picture taken as a kid. I was always trying to insert myself into family photos, always volunteering to be the subject when Dad got a new camera. But somewhere along the way, the narrative had shifted. I'd become the independent one, the self-sufficient one, the one who didn't need attention, or recognition, or inclusion. It was easier for them to believe I preferred being overlooked than to admit they'd stopped seeing me. Sitting there now, watching my brother's reception unfold below me like some elaborate theater production I wasn't allowed to audition for, I realized that Christmas 2 years ago wasn't an isolated incident. It was a pattern. When David graduated law school, the celebration dinner was at an intimate restaurant with a table for 6. David, Zelda, Mom, Dad, and Zelda's parents. I found out about it from social media. When David got his first promotion at the firm, Mom organized a surprise party. She called me the day before to ask if I could pick up balloons. Not to invite me, to ask me to help. When David and Zelda got engaged, I learned about it from a group text that went out to 30 people simultaneously. No personal call, no special moment, just another name on a mass announcement list. Each time there was a reasonable explanation. The restaurant only had 1 table available. The surprise party was just immediate family. The engagement announcement was sent to everyone at the same time, to be fair. But sitting here now, looking down at my family's joy from my assigned position in the cheap seats, all those reasonable explanations started to look like something else entirely. They looked like a deliberate campaign to erase me from my own family story. And the most painful part, I'd helped them do it. Every time I'd smiled and said, "No problem, I understand." Every time I'd made it easy for them to exclude me by pretending it didn't hurt. Every time I'd been the understanding sister, the low-maintenance daughter, the one who never caused problems or demanded attention. I'd taught them that they could treat me this way. I'd trained them to see my absence as more convenient than my presence. Well, I was done being convenient. I was done being understanding. I was done disappearing into the background of my own life. As I sat there on that mezzanine watching my family celebrate below, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to stop making this easy for them, and I was going to start making it impossible for them to ignore me. But to understand why that moment on the mezzanine hit me like a sledgehammer, I need to tell you about what I discovered 3 months before this wedding. The thing I'd been trying to forget, trying to rationalize, trying to pretend, didn't matter. It was a Sunday afternoon in March. I'd stopped by Mom's house to drop off some documents she needed for her taxes. Nothing unusual, just daughter doing daughter things. She was out running errands, but she told me to let myself in and leave the papers on her desk. I'd been in Mom's home office 100 times. It was where she paid bills, where she kept family documents, where she'd helped me with homework throughout high school. But that day, as I was clearing a space on her cluttered desk, I accidentally knocked over a small stack of notebooks. As I bent to pick them up, one fell open. And that's when I saw Zelda's name written across the top of the page in Mom's careful handwriting. I should have closed it. I should have stacked the notebooks back where they belonged and walked away. But something about seeing that name written with such obvious care made me pause. I flipped through a few pages, telling myself I was just making sure nothing was damaged from the fall. What I found changed everything. It wasn't just one notebook. It was three. Three entire journals dedicated to Zelda. Page after page of memories, observations, thoughts, plans. Mom had been documenting everything about her future daughter-in-law for over a year. Zelda mentioned she loves lilies. Remember for Mother's Day bouquet? Zelda graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. So impressive. Zelda's mother makes the most amazing lasagna. Get recipe. Wedding planning with Zelda today. She has such exquisite taste. Zelda's ideas for renovating the guest bathroom are perfect. There were pressed flowers from bouquets Zelda had brought to family dinners. There were photos printed from social media of Zelda at work events, family gatherings, vacation trips. There were lists of gift ideas, notes about her favorite restaurants, reminders about important dates in her life. It was like reading a love letter from a mother to the daughter she'd always wanted. I kept flipping through pages, my hand shaking slightly, as I realized the scope of what I was looking at. This wasn't just casual note-taking. This was devotion. This was careful, intentional documentation of a life that mattered. And then I got to the back of the third notebook, to the section that had been recently written in, and I found something that made my knees buckle. It was a list titled, Wedding Planning, Final Details. And under that, in Mom's handwriting, make sure Jessica understands this day is about David and Zelda. She tends to need attention. I need attention. I read that line 5 times before it really sank in. After 28 years of being the understanding daughter, the independent one, the one who never asked for anything, my mother's private assessment of me was that I need attention. But it was what came next that really broke something inside me. I flipped backwards through the notebooks looking for any mention of my name. Surely there had to be some balance, some equivalent documentation of my life, my achievements, my interests. I found my name exactly 4 times across. 3 notebooks spanning 18 months. 4 times. Jessica's birthday next week. David should call her. Jessica got promoted, should probably acknowledge. Jessica seems tired lately, hope she's taking care of herself. Jessica won't mind helping with wedding prep. She's good at organizing. That was it. 4 brief mentions across 18 months of detailed journaling about our family. And 3 of those mentions were about what I could do for other people, or how other people should handle me. I sat down on Mom's desk chair holding those notebooks, and something that had been building inside me for years finally crystallized into a single devastating realization. I was not the problem child who demanded too much attention. I was the invisible child who'd never learned to demand enough. My mother had been pouring love and attention and careful consideration into documenting every detail of Zelda's life, while simultaneously reducing my existence to a handful of utilitarian afterthoughts. And the most painful part, I'd helped create this dynamic. Every time I'd said, "Don't worry about me, I'm fine," I'd taught them not to worry about me. Every time I'd handled problems on my own instead of asking for help, I'd reinforced their belief that I didn't need support. Every time I'd stepped back to make room for someone else's needs, I'd made my own needs disappear. I'd spent so many years being the low-maintenance daughter that I'd accidentally taught my family to maintain me at the lowest possible level. That day in Mom's office, I carefully restacked those notebooks exactly as I'd found them. I left the tax documents on her desk as planned. I locked the door behind me and drove home in complete silence. And I never said a word about what I'd discovered, because what was I going to say, Mom? I read your private journals, and I'm hurt that you care more about Zelda than me. Why do you document her life but not mine? When did I become so unimportant to you? All of those questions would have just confirmed what she'd already written about me. That I need attention, that I make things about me when they should be about other people. So I buried it. I pushed it down and tried to pretend it didn't matter. But sitting on that mezzanine 3 months later, watching my family celebrate below without me, those notebooks came rushing back with perfect, devastating clarity. This wasn't about wedding logistics or seating constraints or tough choices. This was about a family that had slowly, systematically written me out of their story while I helped them hold the eraser. And I was done helping. I was still sitting there on the mezzanine, lost in the painful clarity of those memories, when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Jessica Martinez. I thought that was you. I turned around to see a man in a well-tailored navy suit walking toward my table. Tall, dark hair with just a touch of gray at the temples, warm brown eyes that looked genuinely happy to see me. It took me a moment to place him, but when I did, I felt the first genuine smile I'd managed all evening. Kyle Richardson, I said, standing up. Oh my God, how long has it been? Since high school graduation, I think, he said, extending his arms for a hug that felt surprisingly natural, given how much time had passed. You look incredible, Jess, really. Kyle Richardson had been 3 years ahead of me at Lincoln High. We'd known each other through the theater program where he'd been the stage manager for most of the productions I'd been in. Smart, funny, reliable Kyle who'd somehow made even the most chaotic dress rehearsals feel manageable. What are you doing here? I asked, gesturing to the elegant surroundings. I work for the venue, he said with a slight grin. Event coordination and guest services. Basically, I make sure rich people's parties go smoothly without them having to think about the details. That sounds like exactly the job for you, I said, and I meant it. Kyle had always been the person who anticipated problems before they happened, who noticed when someone felt left out, who made sure everyone felt included. And you're here because, he gestured toward the celebration below. That's my brother down there, I said, pointing toward David at the head table. The groom, Kyle followed my gaze and then looked back at me with confusion. Your brother, but you're up here. VIP seating, I said with a bitter laugh. Apparently, something shifted in Kyle's expression. He looked from me to the seating arrangement below, and I watched him put together pieces of a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life. How long have you been working here? I asked, suddenly curious. About 2 years. I've done probably 100 weddings in that time. He paused, studying my face. Jessica, in all the weddings I've coordinated, I've never seen immediate families seated separately from the celebration. Not once. There was something in his voice, a careful neutrality that made me think he was choosing his words deliberately. It's complicated family dynamics, I said, falling back on the explanation I'd been giving myself. Limited space, lots of people to accommodate. Kyle was quiet for a moment, then he sat down in the chair across from me. Can I tell you something? As someone who's been watching families navigate these events for 2 years, I nodded. This isn't normal, Jess. What I'm seeing here, the way you've been positioned, isolated from your own family's celebration. This is intentional exclusion. And in my experience, when families go to this much trouble to exclude someone, it's usually because that person represents something they're uncomfortable acknowledging. Like what? Like the truth. Before I could ask what he meant by that, Kyle glanced around to make sure we weren't being overheard, then leaned forward slightly. Your family doesn't see you, Jessica. But I always have. There was something in the way he said it that made me look at him more carefully. What do you mean? I mean that in high school you were the one who noticed when the shy kids were eating lunch alone. You were the one who made sure everyone got a chance to audition for parts, even when the drama teacher was playing favorites. You were the one who stayed after every performance to help strike the set, even when it wasn't your responsibility. I felt a warmth spreading in my chest, a feeling I'd almost forgotten, the feeling of being seen. Really seen. You have this way of making people feel valued, Kyle continued. Do you know that Jamie Morrison credits you with saving his life senior year? I blinked in surprise. Jamie Morrison. He told me years later, said he was planning to skip graduation, maybe not even finish school because he felt like such an outsider. But you convinced him to try out for the spring musical, gave him a reason to show up every day. I remembered Jamie quiet and awkward and brilliant in ways that high school wasn't designed to appreciate. I'd seen him sitting alone at lunch and thought he might like theater, might find a place where being different was actually an asset. I just thought he'd be good at it, I said softly. Exactly. You see people's potential when they can't see it themselves. You make space for people who've been overlooked. Kyle paused, his expression growing more serious. But somehow you've never learned to make space for yourself. Those words hit me like a physical blow because they were so obviously painfully true. Your family has convinced you that you're too much, that you need too much attention, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion they throw your way. Kyle's voice was gentle but firm. But Jessica, you're not too much. You're not even enough for them. And that's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something wrong with them. I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. The relief of finally having someone say out loud what I'd been afraid to think. I've been watching your family tonight, Kyle said quietly. And I've seen some things that I think you should know about. What kind of thing? He pulled out his phone and glanced around again to make sure we were alone. Things about the bride, things that might change how your brother sees this whole situation. My heart started beating faster. Kyle, what are you talking about? Give me 10 minutes, he said, standing up. Let me finish my rounds and make sure everything's running smoothly downstairs. Then come find me by the service entrance on the north side of the building. There's some people you need to meet. What people? People who know Zelda better than your family does. His expression was grave. People who know what she's really like when she thinks no one important is watching. As Kyle walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that my family would suddenly change, would suddenly see me and value me the way I'd always wanted them to. But hope that maybe I was about to stop being the only one who could see what was really happening here. Hope that the truth was about to come to light. And hope that when it did, I wouldn't be standing alone. 10 minutes felt like an hour. I sat there on the mezzanine watching the reception unfold below. But my mind was racing. What did Kyle know about Zelda? What had he seen? And why did his words feel like the first honest thing anyone had said to me about my family in years? When enough time had passed, I made my way downstairs and around to the north side of the building. The service entrance was tucked away from the main guest areas behind a row of perfectly manicured hedges. Kyle was there waiting for me along with two women I didn't recognize. Jessica, Kyle said as I approached, I want you to meet Carmen and Sophia. Carmen was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. Sophia looked to be in her 20s, with the slightly frazzled appearance of someone who'd been running around all evening. Carmen is the head of catering for tonight's event, Kyle explained. Sophia is Zelda's personal stylist and has been working with her for the past 8 months. I looked between the three of them, confused. I don't understand. Why are we meeting like this? Carmen and Sophia exchanged a glance, and I could see something like pity in their expressions. Because, Sophia said quietly, we've been watching what's happening to you tonight, and we think you deserve to know who you're really dealing with. What do you mean? Carmen stepped forward, her voice low but firm. Honey, I've been working events like this for 15 years. I've seen every kind of family dynamic you can imagine. But what I've witnessed from that bride tonight, it's not normal. Sophia nodded. She's been talking about you. A lot. And not in a good way. My stomach dropped. What has she been saying? Sophia pulled out her phone and began scrolling through what looked like text messages. She's been messaging me throughout the evening. Look at this. She held up her phone and I read the screen with growing horror. Jessica looks desperate in that dress. So glad we seated her away from the photos. She's probably going to try to make this about her somehow. She always does. David's family doesn't understand how toxic she is. I'm protecting them from her drama. I felt like I'd been slapped. She wrote this tonight. There's more, Sophia said, scrolling to show me additional messages. These are from the past few months during wedding planning. Jessica will try to insert herself into wedding planning. Shut it down. Don't let Jessica give a speech. She'll make it weird and attention-seeking. Once David and I are married, I can start limiting her access to family events. She's too needy. I read each message twice, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just casual gossip or wedding stress. This was a calculated campaign to isolate me from my own family. Why are you showing me this? I asked, looking up at Sophia. Because I've been in this industry for 5 years, and I've never had a client spend this much energy focused on excluding a family member. It's not normal, Jessica. It's cruel. Carmen nodded. And because we think your family needs to know what kind of person they're celebrating tonight. Kyle stepped forward, his expression serious. There's something else. Carmen, tell her about the conversation you overheard. Carmen looked uncomfortable, but she spoke up. About an hour ago, I was setting up the dessert station near where the bridal party was touching up makeup. I heard Zelda on the phone with someone talking about tonight. What did she say? She said, and I quote, "Phase 1 is almost complete. After tonight, Jessica will be so humiliated she won't want to come to family events anymore. Then I can work on David's parents." The words hit me like ice water. Phase 1. She talked about it like it was a plan, Carmen continued. Like isolating you was just the first step in some bigger strategy. Sophia showed me her phone again. Look at this message from 3 weeks ago. Jessica's isolation at the reception will send a clear message to the family about her place in the hierarchy. After that, I can start suggesting she's become unstable, too demanding, difficult to include. I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. This wasn't just family dysfunction or poor planning or even unconscious favoritism. This was deliberate manipulation. She's been poisoning them against you, Kyle said quietly. Slowly, systematically over months. Planting seeds of doubt, reinforcing the narrative that you're attention-seeking, difficult, too much to handle. But why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would she care so much about me? I'm not a threat to her. I've barely even interacted with her. Sophia and Carmen exchanged another look, and this time it was Kyle who answered. Because you are a threat to her, Jessica. Not romantically, not professionally, but in a way that's much more dangerous to someone like Zelda. I don't understand. You're authentic, Kyle said simply. You're genuine and caring, and you make people feel valued. You represent everything she's pretending to be but isn't. And if your family ever figured that out, if they ever stopped seeing you through the lens she's created and started seeing you clearly, they might start seeing her clearly too, I finished. Exactly. I looked down at Sophia's phone again, rereading those messages, and something clicked into place. All those times over the past year when conversations with my family had felt stilted, when they'd seemed to be waiting for me to do something wrong, when I'd felt like I was being judged for crimes I didn't remember committing. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't paranoia. It was the result of a year-long campaign to rewrite my role in my family's story. There's one more thing, Sophia said hesitantly. Something I probably shouldn't tell you, but I think you need to know. She scrolled to a different conversation, this one between Zelda and someone saved in her contacts as Mom M. I realized with a chill that this was my mother. Thank you for handling the Jessica situation with the seating. You're right that she would have made the evening about her if we'd put her up front. My mother had responded, Of course, dear, we want this to be your special day. Jessica will understand. She's used to being independent. I stared at that exchange, reading it over and over, and felt something break apart inside my chest. It wasn't just Zelda. My own mother had been collaborating in my exclusion, had been convinced that I was the problem that I needed to be managed, that my presence at my own brother's wedding was something that had to be handled. I'm sorry, Sophia said softly. I know this is hard to see. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. I'm glad you showed me. I'm glad I know. Because now I understood. This wasn't about me being too sensitive or reading too much into family dynamics. This was about truth. And the truth was that I'd been living in a carefully constructed lie for over a year, a lie designed to make me doubt my own worth and my own place in my family. But lies, no matter how carefully constructed, have a funny way of falling apart when exposed to light. And I was done living in the shadows. What are you going to do? Kyle asked. I looked back toward the building where my family was celebrating, where my brother was dancing with a woman who had spent months systematically destroying his sister's relationship with their family. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Clarity. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. All of it. Are you sure? Carmen asked gently. Once you do this, there's no going back. I thought about that for a moment. She was right. Once I exposed what Zelda had been doing, once I forced my family to confront the reality of how they'd been treating me, everything would change. Our relationships might never recover. But as I stood there looking at the evidence of my own systematic erasure, I realized something important. They were already broken. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. I'm sure, I said. It's time for my family to see what's really been happening here. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't afraid of taking up space. I was ready to demand it. Walking back into that ballroom felt like stepping into a completely different reality. An hour ago, I'd been the problem child, the attention-seeking sister, the one who needed to be managed and contained. Now I knew the truth. I knew exactly who I was dealing with, and I knew what I had to do. Kyle stayed close behind me as we made our way through the crowd. Sophia had transferred the screenshots to my phone, and Carmen had agreed to back up our story if needed. For the first time all evening, I wasn't walking alone. I found David first standing near the bar with a group of his groomsmen laughing at some story one of them was telling. He looked so happy, so completely unaware that his entire wedding was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. David, I said, approaching the group, I need to speak with you privately. It's important. Something in my tone must have cut through his celebration fog because his smile faded slightly. Jess, is everything okay? No, I said simply. It's not. Can we find somewhere quiet, and we need to get Mom and Zelda? What's going on? He asked, but he was already moving, already sensing that something had shifted. Trust me, I said. You need to hear this. 5 minutes later, we were gathered in a small conference room adjacent to the main ballroom. David, my mother, Zelda, Kyle, and me. Zelda looked annoyed at being pulled away from her reception, but she was maintaining her perfect bride smile. Mom looked worried. Jessica, sweetheart, what's this about? Is there some kind of emergency? I looked around the room at these people who were supposed to be my family, who were supposed to love and protect me, and I felt an unusual calm settle over me. I want to show you something, I said, pulling out my phone. Sophia, Zelda's stylist, has been receiving text messages from Zelda all evening. Messages about me. Zelda's perfect composure cracked just slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me read you a few, I said, looking directly at David. Jessica looks desperate in that dress. So glad we seated her away from the photos. David frowned. Zelda, you didn't say that. She's probably going to try to make this about her somehow. She always does. I continued reading. Jessica, that's enough, Mom said sharply. I don't know what game you're playing, but this is your brother's wedding day. You're right, Mom. It is David's wedding day, which is why he should know that his bride has been systematically manipulating our family for months. I scrolled to the next message. Once David and I are married, I can start limiting her access to family events. She's too needy. The room went silent. That's not real, Zelda said, but her voice lacked conviction. She's making this up. Kyle stepped forward. I can verify these messages. Sophia showed them to me as well. But there's more. I found the conversation between Zelda and my mother. Thank you for handling the Jessica situation with the seating. You're right that she would have made the evening about her if we'd put her up front. I watched my mother's face go pale as she recognized her own words. Mom, I said quietly, you wrote that. You collaborated with Zelda to exclude me from my own brother's wedding because she convinced you I was the problem. Mom started, then stopped, looking between me and Zelda with growing confusion. Phase 1 is almost complete, I continued reading from Carmen's account. After tonight, Jessica will be so humiliated she won't want to come to family events anymore. Then I can work on David's parents. David's face had gone completely white. Zelda, tell me this isn't true. It's not what it sounds like, Zelda said, her perfect bride facade finally cracking. Jessica has always been jealous of our relationship. She's been trying to cause problems since day one. Show them the other messages, Kyle said quietly. I scrolled through Sophia's screenshots. Jessica's isolation at the reception will send a clear message to the family about her place in the hierarchy. After that, I can start suggesting she's become unstable, too demanding, difficult to include. The silence in that room was deafening. David stared at his new wife like he was seeing her for the first time. You planned this. You deliberately isolated my sister at our wedding as part of some larger strategy. David, you don't understand, Zelda said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Jessica is manipulative. She makes everything about herself. I was protecting our family. Our family, I said, my voice deadly quiet. I am his family. I'm his sister. I've been his sister for 28 years. You're nobody, Zelda snapped, and for the first time her mask completely fell away. You're a pathetic attention-seeking nobody who can't stand that David chose me over you. The words hung in the air like poison. David took a step back from his wife, his face a mixture of horror and disgust. What did you just say? David, Zelda said, realizing her mistake and trying to backtrack. I didn't mean, you called my sister nobody, David said, his voice getting louder. At our wedding, after spending months convincing our family that she was the problem. Mom was staring at Zelda like she was seeing her clearly for the first time. You manipulated me. You made me believe Jessica was being difficult when she was just trying to be part of her own family. All of you are overreacting, Zelda said, but panic was creeping into her voice. This is exactly what Jessica wanted. She's turned you all against me on my wedding day. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. I just gave them the evidence. And with that, I turned around and walked toward the door. Jessica, wait, David called after me. I paused at the threshold and looked back at my brother. This person I'd loved and supported my entire life, who had allowed his wife to erase me from his celebration. I love you, David, I said. I always have. But I'm done fighting for a place in a family that doesn't want me there. And I walked out, leaving them to deal with the truth they'd spent so long avoiding. I made it exactly 20 feet down the hallway before I heard the shouting start. Not from the conference room, from the ballroom. Zelda's voice, high and shrill, cutting through the elegant atmosphere like a knife through silk. This is ridiculous. You're all insane. It's my wedding day. I stopped walking and turned back toward the sound, as did several other guests who were mingling in the hallway. Through the open doors of the ballroom, I could see Zelda storming across the dance floor, her beautiful wedding dress trailing behind her like the tail of an angry comet. David was following her, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Mom was right behind him, and behind her Kyle, who caught my eye and nodded grimly. The entire reception had gone silent. 200 guests were frozen in place, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, conversations dying mid-sentence, as they watched the bride of the evening have what could only be described as a complete meltdown. You're all against me, Zelda shrieked, spinning around to face the crowd. Her perfect updo was coming undone, wisps of hair falling around her face. Her makeup, which had been flawless an hour ago, was now smudged from tears of rage. Zelda, please, David said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. Let's talk about this privately. No, she screamed. I'm done pretending your family is toxic. Your sister is a manipulative bitch who can't stand that you chose me. The collective gasp from the guests was audible. I watched from the doorway as my mother stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Zelda, that's enough. Don't you dare, Zelda whirled on her. You agreed with me? You said Jessica was attention-seeking. You said she needed to be managed. Mom's voice was quiet but carried clearly across the silent room. I was wrong. I was manipulated into being wrong. That's when Zelda completely lost it. She's poisoned you all against me. She screamed, pointing dramatically toward the doorway where I stood. She can't stand that David loves me more than her. She's jealous and pathetic and... Stop! David's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. Just stop talking! The pain in my brother's voice was palpable. This man, who had been radiantly happy just an hour ago, was now standing in the middle of his own reception, watching his new wife destroy herself in front of everyone they knew. Kyle appeared beside me in the doorway. There's something else, he said quietly. Something Zelda doesn't know we know. He pulled out his phone and showed me a document. Her prenup modification request, filed yesterday. She was planning to change the financial terms after the wedding. I stared at the legal document on his screen. She was going to take him for everything. Gets worse. Look at the beneficiary clause. My blood ran cold as I read the fine print. In the event of David's death, everything would go to Zelda with no provisions for his family. How did you get this? Sophia. Turns out she's been documenting everything Zelda's been saying and doing for months. She was planning to quit after the wedding, but she wanted evidence in case Zelda tried to destroy her reputation. Out in the ballroom, Zelda was still ranting, but now guests were starting to pull out their phones. The perfect wedding was becoming a viral disaster in real time. Your entire family is beneath me, Zelda shouted, her voice hoarse from screaming. I should have known better than to marry into this pathetic, small-minded family. That's when David stepped forward, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that silences rooms. You're right about one thing, Zelda. You should have known better. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what looked like a folded document. Because I know about the prenup modification you filed yesterday. I know about the financial clauses you tried to change without telling me. And now I know exactly who you really are. Zelda's face went from red with rage to white with panic in the span of a heartbeat. David, I can explain. No, he said, his voice steady and final. You can't, because there's no explanation for spending months systematically destroying my sister's relationship with our family. There's no explanation for manipulating my mother into excluding Jessica from her own brother's wedding. And there's sure as hell no explanation for calling my sister a nobody on what was supposed to be our wedding day. He handed the document to her, and I could see from the doorway that it was legal papers of some kind. Annulment papers, he said loud enough for the room to hear. Filed an hour ago. This marriage is over before it began. The silence that followed was absolute. Not a cough, not a whisper, not even the clink of ice in a glass. Zelda stood there in her $10,000 dress, holding papers that declared her fairy tale over while 200 people watched her perfect life implode in real time. You can't do this to me, she whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. I didn't do this to you, David said quietly. You did this to yourself. And then he turned away from her, walked across that silent ballroom, and came straight to where I was standing in the doorway. Jess, he said, and his voice broke slightly. I'm so sorry. I looked at my little brother, this man I'd protected and supported my entire life, and I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw him finally seeing me. I know, I said softly. I know you are. Behind us, Zelda was gathering up her dress and walking toward the exit, her head held high, despite the fact that her entire world had just collapsed in front of everyone she'd tried to impress. The perfect wedding was over, but for the first time in years, I felt like maybe our family was about to begin. 1 week later, I was walking along the Charles River in Boston, watching the early morning light dance across the water. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Can we have dinner? Just us. I need to apologize properly." I looked at the message for a long moment, then slipped my phone back into my pocket without responding. 10 minutes later, it rang. Dad's name on the screen. "Jessica." His voice was quiet, older somehow. "I've been thinking about everything that happened last week, about how we treated you, how we let her convince us that you were the problem when you were never the problem." I stopped walking and sat down on a bench overlooking the water. "I was wrong," he continued. "We were all wrong. You deserved so much better from us." "I know," I said softly. "I know I did. Can you forgive us? Can we try to fix this?" I watched a family of ducks glide across the river, moving together in perfect formation, and I thought about forgiveness, about family, about the difference between the two. "Dad," I said finally, "I don't need an apology. I don't need you to fix anything. I just need peace." "Jessica, I love you," I said, cutting him off gently. "I love all of you, but I'm done trying to earn a place I should have always had." After I hung up, I sat there for a while, watching the river flow toward the harbor, carrying everything along with it. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the broken. Then I stood up, walked to the train station, and bought a ticket to Maine. The solo trip I'd been putting off for 3 years, always finding excuses, always prioritizing family obligations over my own dreams. Not anymore. As the train pulled away from the station, I pressed my face to the window and watched Boston disappear behind me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward myself. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting for your place at a table that was never meant for you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is build your own table. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Not to escape, but to find yourself. Not to punish them, but to free yourself. I'm Jessica Martinez, and this is the story of how I learned that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who sees your worth. And sometimes, the first person who needs to see that worth is you. What do you think about my choice to walk away? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own self-worth? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about finding your strength in the most difficult moments. Remember, you are never too much for the right people, and you are always enough exactly as you are.